everyone, this is Dr. Anna, and I am here to start Module 4 in Historical Geology, and it is all about evolution. Before we jump into it, I want you to remember some basic definition. The first one is the fact. Fact is an observation that has been repeatedly confirmed. Law is a descriptive generalization about how the physical world behaves. Hypothesis, remember you did that in high school or probably even elementary school. It's a testable statement that can be used to build inferences and explanations. And the theory, and this is scientific theory we're talking about, it's a well sustained explanation that incorporates facts, laws, inferences, and tested hypotheses. So remember, a theory is much bigger. See, it's much, much more. It's a well sustained explanation that incorporates facts, and you know, facts are facts, laws, and laws are laws, and inferences, tested hypotheses. So, what is evolution? Evolution, this is just a definition which comes from Helena Curtis from 1989. And evolution can be precisely defined as any change in the frequency of alleles within a gene pool from one generation to the next one. So, we're going to start with the history of evolution theory. So, we're going to talk about who did what. The idea of organic evolution will state that all life form on Earth is descended from another life form. In another word, all life is linked by a process of ancestry and descendant, just like a family tree you can see over here. This observation goes back at least as far as the Greeks in the 5th century. They realized that all animals were built on a common plan. In some of the Greek philosophers, such as Aristotle, mind the idea of everything changing, and that was a very basic element. However, the dominance of church in the Western thought of contemplation of evolution for over 1,000 years. According to the Christian beliefs, as you know, all plants and animals were created as we see them today, and there is no possibility that species could change through time. This is a picture of Archbishop James Ussher. We already talked about that in the geologic time. During the 1700s, it became more and more difficult for scientists to stay with the static view of nature, which is stated in the Bible. And because their expanding knowledge of the biological world made it harder and harder to state with that. So these are the people who started to actually write down things they observed. Carl Linné, and you don't have to worry about the birth and the death year because I won't ask that. He did the standardized classification of organic species. There was no more than 8,000 species at the time. However, there were a lot of discovery trips, and they discovered hundreds of new species. Therefore, the question has emerged. They all learned about the Noah Ark in the Bible. Then they were starting to think about how could all of those animals fit onto the Noah Ark. And it's really interesting because now you can go somewhere in Kentucky and visit the Noah Ark. They tried to put it together like it was at the time. But there are other questions. Not only how did they all fit on the Noah Ark, but I don't know if you guys know it, but in Australia, there are no placental mammals, only marsupials. You know, marsupial is the one who has the little pouch on their belly and the baby is growing up in that pouch. So how could that happen that in Australia you only have those and in Europe you have all normal mammals and not marsupials? If all the animals on earth had dispersed from mountain Ararat, which is in Turkey, that's where the ark has touched down. How come you have different types of animals in different parts of the world? Why do we have different animals in Australia than in Europe? And why in America and Europe has about the same kind of animals? These are very interesting questions, and the Bible definitely couldn't really give answers to them. There is George Cuvier. Cuvier, by the early 1800s, demonstrated that some of the animals were extinct, and actually big animals, such as the mastodon. And that was an evidence nobody could really hide anymore. Cuvier soon after demonstrated that the species which become extinct soon will be replaced by some other species. How could this be explained by Genesis, which states that all species were created at the same time? How could you have some disappear and other emerge? So scientists soon came up with the idea that Genesis could not possibly explain the fossil record, but they didn't have any other explanation for it. Now we have to talk about George Buffon. George Buffon, he did very important steps for the concept of evolution. He was the first to state the concept of species and noted that each species exists as a separate entity. He also realized that no species could interbreed with some other species. He also noted that the environment directly caused variation in the offspring. He was the first to realize the interrelationship between environment and species. This is what we call today adaptation. He recognized changes due to inheritance of characteristics from both parents. When one of your parents is left-handed and you're going to be left-handed, that kind of changes or inheritances I'm talking about. He put the two concepts together, the statement that modification of organisms are due to inheritance of characters and the changes caused by the environment. However, he could not and did not explain how these changes happen. And here we are with Erasmus Darwin, who was Charles Darwin's grandfather. What is really, really important about Erasmus Darwin that he recognized ontogeny. Ontogeny is the development of an individual from the first cell to all the way to the developed animals. So we're talking about for example, for humans, the time you spend in your mom's belly. You could see the caterpillar. It's really actually visible out in nature, how the caterpillar turns into butterfly or how the tadpole turns into frog. He saw that in breeding, changes can be recognized from generation to generation, although these changes are really small. He also realized that the species became adapted to their environment primarily by the way they gather food. For example, the elephant's trunk. They eat the grass and lifting it to their mouth. Or by security. For example, protective coloration of the wings, shells, legs. For example, the butterfly. When the tree has a certain color and the fly flies there to rest, if it has a very different color, everybody comes and eats it. But if it has similar color than the tree trunk, then it's going to survive because nobody sees it. So that's how I mean this. The next one we have to talk about is Jean-Baptiste Lamarck. He was one of the greatest naturalists of the 18th century. He founded the modern invertebrate zoology. He was the first to see all life, both plants and animals, as an integrated whole, and he used the word biology for it. He named first the inheritance of acquired characteristics. This is kind of a hard word, acquired characteristics, but in other words, that just states that the effect of environments could be inherited by the offspring. Let's see an example. For example, if a giraffe is born with longer neck and the leaves are higher in the trees and nobody with shorter necks can eat, but the ones with the longer necks, then those giraffes will be able to eat and survive and reproduce. Therefore, the ones with the shorter necks could not eat, so they die out, where the longer neck does eat and reproduce. Therefore, the next generation will all have longer neck, and probably some of them will have even longer neck. So that is the effect of environments, which could be inherited by the offspring. He found mechanism for this theory. The change of the environments will lead to changes in needs of the organisms. Animals have to change their habits to be able to survive a little bit different environment. So that's how the giraffe got the longer neck. Now we are at Charles Darwin, 1809, February 12th, the same day as Thomas Jefferson's birthday. Darwin was very interested in everything. He was a medical student at the University of Edinburgh, where he learned medicine and also natural history. He went and studied theology. He finished college in a Christ College in Cambridge. He was always interested in natural science and collected animal, plant, and rock specimens. But he didn't collect like we would. Like I would pick up a rock and put it somewhere on my shelf and that's it. And probably for a while I remember where I did pick it up, but later I forget. No, he was very systematic. He had notebooks. He wrote down everything. He drew all the species he collected. He was just very organized person. His family was pretty rich, So he didn't have to have a job. And then his father had figured it out that there was this discovery trip coming up, and the ship captain needs somebody to talk to. Darwin was hired as a naturalist on this voyage of the HMS Beagle around the earth. Can you imagine? I just want you to close your eyes and think about it. Oh my God, I would have loved to do that job. But I couldn't because I'm not as organized as he was. So during the trip, he collected a huge amount of species from different plants and animals. And he also made tremendous amount of observation in his notebooks. That's the thing. He drew the species. He was describing it so detailed that if you saw his description, you could still imagine the animal in front of you. And this gave him the basis of his later publication and his theory of evolution. Here is the HMS Beagle right here. And this is the trip he did. Look at it. The rats, so of course they left from England. And look, they went all around South America, spent some time at the Galapagos, and then they went further, go around Tasmania, even a little bit of New Zealand, Australia, Tasmania, pretty close. And then they went close to Madagascar and then South Africa, and then go back to England. So you see, the red is the journey out and the blue is the journey home. What a trip. And I have a movie about it, so I just want you to see a little.
Who was Charles Darwin?
Charles Darwin was an English naturalist who was fascinated with nature.
But not an ordinary naturalist, with an ordinary fascination with nature.
Hello. What are you doing here?
Why such beauty when no one can see?
In 1831, Charles Darwin was only 22 when he began a 5-year voyage aboard the British ship HMS Beagle to explore, observe, and study the natural world. The Beagle sailed throughout South America and to remote places like the Galapagos Islands off Ecuador. Darwin later wrote that he felt like a blind man being given sight. He returned to England with his mind and notebooks full of fantastic images.
What a brilliant red.
Nothing seemed too insignificant for his scrutiny.
He kept detailed records of what he saw during his voyage on the Beagle. He collected fossils. He kept detailed recordings of plants and animals. He drew them. He observed them.
Little did Darwin realize that his years on the Beagle would begin a lifetime of hard work and controversy.
The greatest scientists of Darwin's day referred to the appearance of species originally as the mystery of mysteries. Now, Darwin was an ambitious young man, and he decided to tackle this greatest mystery in the biology of his day.
Darwin took on the task of unraveling this mystery methodically, with patience and care. Gradually, one simple and elegant idea became more and more clear to him, that all living things are related. It was a conclusion that to Darwin could not be escaped. But he also knew he was in dangerous waters. He rarely shared his thoughts with others, but his brother was an exception.
The similarity of structure indicates one thing and one thing only. An ancient common ancestor. Real flesh and blood parents.
Why didn't you say so then? You must publish your ideas, if only to establish your priority. What's holding you back?
You have to understand that Darwin was a respectable man. His father was a well-known physician. He came from a well-known family. He went to Cambridge University to train for the Church of England, and he knew eminent scientists of his day.
In Darwin's time, the prevailing explanation for the great diversity of life was a literal interpretation of the Earth's creation as described in Genesis, the first book of the Bible.
Established naturalists believed that God created each individual species of animals and plants, usually miraculously, at the beginning, and that these species had stayed fixed.
We allow the planets and the sun to be governed by natural laws. But the smallest insect we wish to be created by a special act of God. Surely the creation of life has to be explained in the same way as geology, using natural, ordinary, everyday causes.
Well, in theory, yes, but in practice there can be no question about the prime cause. Divine will.
Shouldn't men of science be free to investigate each and every means by which new species come into being?
If by that you mean wild accusations about man's ancestry, the answer is no.
He was doing something highly unorthodox in his day. Not unorthodox because it went against the church per se, but because it went against all of natural history in Great Britain. He knew he stood to jeopardize the whole united establishment of science, politics, and the church. He knew that he could get into very, very bad trouble and ruin his career.
And yet Darwin also knew the evidence he gathered and the tests he conducted supported the revolutionary idea that living things are related and have changed over millions and millions of years. This new way of thinking was a mark of his genius. It took Darwin 23 years of work to overcome his own doubts to finally present his ideas to the world. His revolutionary book, The Origin of Species, introduced a scientific theory to explain how evolution occurs. He called his mechanism of change natural selection.
Darwin had the courage to go against what was believed in those days, and it changed the world in a profound way.
One of the remarkable things about Darwin's contribution that is, I think, too seldom appreciated is he didn't just tell us how we got here. He told us, in a sense, why biology makes sense. The sequences of our genes, the structures of our body, and even our instincts in terms of behavior all make sense and all tie together because of evolution.
If I were to give a prize for the single best idea anybody ever had, I'd give it to Darwin for the idea of natural selection. Ahead of Newton, ahead of Einstein, it was Darwin's great stroke to see how to unite the facts about the excellence of design of all the different species. He understood that what he was proposing was a truly revolutionary idea.
In Westminster Abbey, there is an area called Scientists' Corner. There, in the company of that other revolutionary scientific thinker, Sir Isaac Newton, lies Charles Darwin.
So Darwin came to understand that any population consists of individuals that are all slightly different from one another. Like, if you just look around, we are all humans, but then every single one of us is a little bit different. Those individuals having a variation that gives them advantage in staying alive long enough to successfully reproduce, as I just already said that, are the ones who are pass on their traits more frequently to the next generation. Like, how many of you have seen deer fighting? And why do they fight? Because they want to be the strongest one, and the strongest one is the one who gets to reproduce. So his genes will go on to the next generation. So they will inherit the genes which are more fit for the environment. So that's why the evolution happens, and we see it every single day with our eyes, our own eyes. So subsequently, their traits become more common and the population evolves. Darwin called this descent with modification, just a little bit of modification. And this movie really shows this very, very well. Look at it.
Take a look at this mantis here. This thing is almost perfectly disguised as a leaf. But you can see, if you look at the underside, that it's a praying mantis, just like you'd find in a garden in North America. But this one is highly modified. Its thorax is flattened out to look like a leaf, and its wings are modified to look like leaves. You can even see the veins. If you imagined a population of mantises, and some looked more like leaves than others, those ones that look like leaves may tend to survive and reproduce more than others. And so a series of modifications could build up over time to result in an almost perfectly leaf-like mantis. But if you put it on a background, on which it doesn't belong, I mean, it just sticks out like a sore thumb, and it would almost certainly, where are you going there, pal? It would almost certainly get eaten by something.
So one of the most exciting part of the work for Darwin was the Galapagos Island. He saw that there are species in the different islands which are a little bit different from one another, and they have similar ones existing on the west coast of South America. See, South America and the Galapagos Islands is now 600 miles away from each other. The Galapagos are typical hotspots, just like the Hawaiian Islands. And so therefore the birds are originating from the mainland, and then from island to island, they are a little bit different. And he was really struck by this fact. And he realized that the key to why this difference existed was connected with the fact that the various species lived in a little bit different kinds of environments, mostly about gathering their food. See, these are the different finches, which are the same type of birds, but each of them has a little different beak shape, you see? And this is how he came about with the ancestral species, which is the one on the mainland. And then here we have the different version of that species. And here is an amazing movie explaining this.
Although he didn't realize it at the time, the most important specimens that Charles Darwin brought back from the Galapagos were finches. Initially, he wasn't sure how they were related, but when, back in England, they were examined by the ornithologist John Gould, he reported that in fact Darwin had brought back 13 different species of finch, all of which were unique to the Galapagos. This realization played a significant role in Darwin's formulation of his theory of evolution. The most important differences between the finches came in their beaks. Some were large, some were small. Each one was suited to the availability of particular foodstuffs. Eventually, Darwin theorized that different species of finch had evolved on different islands, their distinctive beaks being an adaptation to distinct natural habitats or environmental niches. In the years since Darwin's visit, many other scientists and ornithologists have come to the Galapagos to study its finches. In this experiment, researchers are observing the woodpecker finch, using this wooden box to stand in for a tree. The woodpecker finch is one of the only birds to use tools to help it find food. A stick or small twig enables it to dig deeper into tree bark for insect larvae. This skill enables it to survive in conditions which other birds would find difficult. In the dry season, it can gather up to 50% of its food in this way. Woodpecker finches are hungry birds, which in the wild need to eat every 3 hours, so they never turn down the chance of a free meal.
I think right now is the time to stop the first segment, and I'm going to continue it with the next segment. Okay, I will see you there.